This is at the top off of a parlor grand piano, which is an official size of a grand piano. They have baby grands, and then they have full-size grands, and then they have concerts. So, and there might be even a couple of other sizes. Anyway, this one had seen better days. It's the customer found that the best solution was to take it to the dump, which is a shame. It's about from 1904. This one was produced then. She just took some pieces off of it because she couldn't bear to part with them, and she thought maybe we could make something out of them. So she brought this to me. Actually, I went and picked it up, but the fact is, we brought it here with the intention of trying to make a table with its parts. Now the top is here, obviously, and it has a very interesting stressed, crackled finish on it because some, I think, well-meaning person came along at some point and with a brush, they put varnish on it. This might have been 40 or 50 years ago, but that varnish has crackled and checked and come separated in some places, and the original brush strokes that he used are gone. I mean, they're showing up. They're just the opposite. So where this part was flipped onto here, you can see almost the original sheen because it wasn't supposed, wasn't exposed to the sun the way it was over here. Anyway, the whole thing's very damaged. But it was at one time a beautiful piece. And so she got the top off of it. She also got the 3 sets of legs. Now this particular piano had sets of legs that looked like this. This assembly functioned as one leg. It has beautiful brass, heavy-duty casters on it that were made specifically for this. It also has kind of a neat dovetail fitting here. So these pieces would have been set down and guys would hold it, and then they would put the keyboard portion on top of it. And then there would be a corresponding dovetail piece that this would slide into. And then once it was slid in, we have 2 toenail screws that would hold it in place. But the dovetailed brass piece is what really was the strength of this legs. So we had 2 straight ones that went under here and under here, roughly. And then we had a curved one at the back. And that's kind of a neat piece. Just like the straight ones, but it was made with this very elegant curve to reflect the curve at the end of the at the piano. They could have just made it flat like the others, but they wanted it a little nicer than that. So they made this beautiful curve. So, and these are actually canted slightly to follow the curve, the legs are. So it's a very nicely made piece. And she wanted to make some sort of a table, but she doesn't have a lot of room. So I decided that, we went back and forth with it. And what we're going to do is cut part of this top. We're going to take it. I wanted this to be the front of this occasional table. It's going to be 20 inches by 20 inches, and it goes in their sitting room between 2 chairs. Well, I wanted this to be the feature on the front of it. So what we're going to do is the front of the table is going to be here, like this. The back is going to be here, and then we have a piece of top that has to be cut from this. Now, when we get, it's going to be sort of like this if I can get my mother's pug to be out of the way. There we go. This is going to go underneath there. You can kind of see this will overhang it, of course, and then this front edge will be about 20 inches wide, and that curve is just about dead on, which it should be. It was made to go with it. So that'll be the front of the table. The back will be this one, the square one. You won't see that as much. So that leaves me with the challenge of taking a piece of this top, cutting it right out, 20 inches wide, going 20 inches back. And then I'm going to take that piece and make it the top of that table. And we've decided that rather than try to strip it down and refinish it, we're just going to leave the finish the way it is. We're just going to leave it, and she's just going to explain to people it's a family heirloom, and it has the patina of age to it, and it is what it is. Now, what these were usually made out of, contrary to popular belief, these were not solid pieces that were glued together, and then that's what you see. Because the grain quality is so consistent throughout this. It's really what we call these days an architectural grain pattern. It's book match veneers knitted together. Now, what the core of this piece would be, that is pieces of mahogany glued next to each other. thinned down to probably close to a 1/2 inch, maybe a 9/16, a little more. And then what they do is they put this beautiful architectural veneer on both sides. So we have a balanced construction. So rather than the type of plywood you're used to seeing, which has many layers in it, this has just, we'll have a mahogany core, a solid mahogany core with these, what were once beautiful veneers on the front and the back. So, and you actually see the core, the mahogany core here, where it comes through. So I'm going to, as I said, I'm going to do as little as possible to it. I just want to cut it out. I'm probably going to use my panel saw to do that because it's the only thing that can handle something this big. But I may rough cut it oversized with my jigsaw at first, then take the remaining one and go over to the panel saw and make sure we get right in the center of that curve. Because this curve changes radius as it goes around. It's not all the same. It's really kind of an oval. So I have to get it right in the middle and make sure everything's right. And then these will just be square cut and the back will be square cut. And I'm going to decide whether I'm going to do any treatment to these edges after I cut it out. I suspect I may just end up putting a clear finish on it. But that is yet to be decided. So our first step is to map out exactly where this is and then start cutting. Okay, so we've started the disassembly. We took off the big hinged portion of the top. My assistant took this very elegant piano hinge off of it. It's solid brass. It has a lovely patina to it. It has a single rod driven through it in the factory when the two halves were put together. So these are separate little hinges but with a single steel rod. If we do things like jewelry boxes or things of that nature, I would use these hinges because they're solid brass and they're just beautiful. So that's one of the things we can scavenge off of this. This is that top. It has the same issues that the other one had. It's all very crackled. The finish has a kind of a neat age to it. And as we've shown a flashlight on it, we can see that the grain of this mahogany is spectacular. It's just wonderful. It has depth of color in it that you don't usually see. It's masked right now by a very old murky finish. So we're going to fix that. We will find a use for this piece of the top. The main piece with the curve on it, I think, is going to be mostly destroyed when we make the smaller piece for the customer. This part we can use. We might be able to use a little bit of that one, but I'm mostly focused on this. What I did find out, because where I took the hinge off on this edge, we were able to find out, get a better look at the construction of this plywood. It is a lumber core plywood. We knew that, but what I didn't realize was that the veneer on the top and on the back is nearly 1/8 of an inch thick. They don't even make veneer like that these days as far as I know. Now, at least not for this sort of use. Veneer is usually 1/30th of an inch thick. It's very thin. And that's actually a thick piece of veneer. Some of it is 1/100th inch thick. So 1/8 of an inch is a great thick veneer, and I can really work with that. So I can, what that boils down to is I can strip this top and I can sand it without worrying about sanding through that veneer layer. So we can use this for something. And when we do, we're going to try to make sure that whatever piece we design out of it, still that the original piano shows through. We want it to be fairly obvious that this was a piece of a piano at one point. So it's just kind of a neat thing to do. But there's just wonderful, there's a lovely little key lock here. I don't know where, I don't know why you need one on a piano, but there it is. There's a little push button for it. Anyway, we're going to set this aside, and now we're going to get ready. We're going to locate where our occasional tabletop is going to be coming out of that big one. For that, I'm going to grab the curved leg, and I'm going to go over and I'm just going to set it right on here. And oh, before I do that, I almost forgot, I have to take off this nifty little brass dovetail piece, because that's going to just, it's going to be in our way. So I have to somehow find a way to turn these screws. I'm going to need to put a wrench on it. Okay, so this is one of those projects, nothing's easy. So I had to take this dovetail brass plate. I'm sure they had these made specifically for them. And they have these monster slotted head wood screws that were holding them in. And I guess when a screw's been in over 100 years, it really doesn't want to come out. So we had a billy hell of a time getting them out of there. We had to put a clamp on the screwdriver, and then put a wrench on the screwdriver. We did get them out. So now I'm taking it out of, I'm just kind of knocking it out of the mortise. And what they did is after they cut the mortise, they put this piece in and then they put little shim pieces around it. So it was really tight packed into the mortise. Then they put these 4 monster screws in there. Now I tell you, this thing did not want to come out. But you can tell it was built to handle the weight of an entire piano, which is no small feat. So I'm just going to tap this out. See, here's your little shims. They're actually wedges. I mean, these guys think of everything. It's amazing the way these things are put together. So clearly when they cut these mortises, you can see where they used a hand brace and hogged out a lot of the material. Then that just came and chiseled along. Another guy came with these little pre-made shims, fitted around it, and then put the screws in, and she was ready to go. Now what I can do is take this piece and set it right on the curved end of our big top and figure out exactly where we want the edges of the new top to be cut. So as we put it around here, I'm just going to put that, and I mean that thing is right on. It's just amazing. And I'm going to kind of eyeball it. I think we're cocked a little bit right now. I mean, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but we want it really close. I mean, this is a very nice angle right here. Now, this is, of course, going to be mounted underneath. It's not there. But this tells us exactly where I want the cut to be and how I want it to go. The thing I have to make sure of is that the grain, which is perfectly aligned this way, is perfectly aligned in the new top. I don't want the grain to be slightly off in the rectangular top. That would be unacceptable. So I'm going to just do the best I can with this and just see how the grain lines look. Now here we actually have one of the big splits that came through from the lumber core, came through the face. So that tells me the orientation of the grain. And as I'm seeing here, I think I need to go a little further, actually, like that. Okay, so what we've done is we have put this leg, which is going to be the front, it's going to be underneath. We've oriented it parallel to this edge. The back flat edge of this is parallel to that. So that should pretty much guarantee that the grain lines are going to be square. Now, I want a 3/4 inch overhang on each side because that matches the overall dimension that she wanted. This is 18.5 wide, she wanted 20-inch overall width. So that's 3/4 each side. So the easiest way to do this is I'm just going to take a 3/4 inch thick piece and set it on here, and you know, a pencil line isn't going to show up very well in this this dark finish. But it's an old like shellac type finish. So I'm just going to mark it. And I mean, this leaves a really nice scribe line. So you can see that. That's a really clear line. So we're going to do that on both sides. And then when we're done, we're going to remove this, and then I'll measure back from the edge here. I'll measure 20 inches back, because that's also the depth we want. So I'm just going to scribe this one. Okay, so now we have our two scribed lines. Those are the ones we're going to end up cutting on the panel saw. And then the back line also. So what I'm going to do is cut just outside of that profile with my saber saw, just to get the thing out of this big piece. And I want to preserve as much of this as I can, because I feel like when I get off this finish and sand the mahogany out, I'm going to find it's a really spectacular piece. So I'm going to try to save every scrap of it that I can. Anyway, our next step is to cut just outside of those lines. Then I'm going to take them over and clean them up on the panel saw. And then we'll go from there. We'll then be able to judge the quality of the edge. Whether we just want to sand it and put a clear finish on it for protection, or whether we want to attempt to stain it. Okay, so we've marked out our top for our little occasional table, which the legs are going under. that leaves all this area for some use, which I don't really know yet. She doesn't want it back. She said, no, keep it. So I said, okay, I'll see what I can do with it. Now, the temptation is to just set up the rip fence on the saw and cut right across here, fairly close to this line. And then I would have this big slab. However, I'm kind of liking the idea of preserving this whole curve because it's clearly part of a grand piano. And it would nest nicely into a corner just for somebody to put a laptop on or something like that. So I'm sort of struggling between the two. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm not even going to try to decide. I'm just going to take my saber saw, a jigsaw, and I'm just going to go slightly outside this line right around the corner. So I'm going to drill a hole here and a hole here so I can go into it and out of it with the jigsaw blade. And then I'll cut this piece out and then I'll trim up those edges real nice on the table saw. And then I'm going to take this and set it aside. I'm going to play around with the finish a little bit, see if I can strip this off easily enough and bring out the original beautiful mahogany. So that's our next step. So when I cut this out, I kept it about a 1/16 inch away from this line, much closer than on this one and on this one. On this one I cut across and you get a little tear out with the grain, so I had to keep it far enough away from the line so that that'll be removed from the table saw. But I don't really want to do this part on the joiner because we'd be jointing end grain, and although you can do it, it's not real slick. So I'm going to actually come up to this line on the jointer, which is I think a little easier than trying to freehand it on the table saw or something like that. So anyway, we should be able to come pretty close. Then from here, I'm going to go over to the table saw, clean up this, and then put it on the cross cut and do that. Easy, easy. I'm slightly thicker away from the line here than here. Here I'm almost to the line. So I'm going to do a trick on the, where you get a tapered joint on it. So I'm going to actually start at this end and touch this to the edge of the outfeed table. And then push it through. And then what it'll do is it'll take off 0 here and it'll take off whatever the setting is here. So I'm going to set it for about a 32nd of an inch. It's a little light right now. There we go. And this is how we can make tapered legs this way too. But in this case, I'm just going to even it up to that line by doing it. So we start with the thing on the other side, like that. And then I'm actually going to tip it up off so the blade can start running without me having that thing in it. So we're going to start it. Lower it down. So we have one edge is pretty close to perfect as you're going to get, and there is one difference here that I'm a little surprised by, and that is the core of this thing is poplar. It's not mahogany. I assumed it would be mahogany for compatibility with the veneer and because you see the edge of it here. But they apparently just used an opaque stain to make it look like the color that was on the mahogany. So this is a poplar core with the mahogany veneer. Now we're going to take this, I need to remove this little button here, and we're going to take it over to the table saw and get it cleaned up. And these edges look very nice. So I may just touch a little clear. I'll test here, put a little clear on it, see what it looks like, and see if I need to put some stain on it, and then a clear finish. Okay, so here's our dry fit. We got the little brass dovetail sections off of the tops of these, and we're looking at the underside of the table here. And this, we have about a 3/4 inch, overhang all the way around. And it's a very unusual little table. It's actually proportionally less bizarre than I thought it was going to be. It looks kind of neat. Now, it's going to be sitting on these casters, which are fairly close together, but when we put it on her floor and kind of tested them, it's good enough. It's just going to be an occasional table, and she didn't want to remove these beautiful brass casters because they were part of the piano, and they're made to handle the weight of a piano. I'm just going to end up very carefully measuring the length of my screws and putting screws in here. To mount this in, I may put a couple of additional ones in there. Just for a little extra strength. Then we're just going to do touch up on the dark parts of the finish. I am going to stain these edges. If this was mahogany, I might have just left it and put a clear finish on it, but it's poplar. So I am going to stain it dark so that won't be much of a feature, because we don't need a raw poplar feature on a dark mahogany table. Okay, so there's our edge. Actually, that's a pretty damn close to color match. Okay, that's nice. We do the back and the other edge, and then we let them dry. Okay, so here it is. This is our finished table. It really has a cool vibe to it, I think. It's a neat looking little table. And the benefit is, I still have this, which I can do anything I want with, because she's just saying she has no use for it. I'm not sure what I'll ever do with it, but we'll see. We'll keep it around for a while. And we have the rest of the top. There is one thing I would mention. This finish is very fragile. It scratches if you look at it cross-eyed. So it's going to be a problem. I couldn't put a subsequent finish on it because it has been polished with pledge or something like that. Some sort of a furniture polish that has a silicone or a dimethicone in it. It makes it impossible. You can never get it out, and you can never spray it because the finish will never stick to it. So that's it, folks. Even if I sand the finish off, that dimethicone will have migrated through the finish into the wood, and I can't do anything with it. So I'm hoping that on the big top that I have left over, perhaps the underside of it was never polished, and I could use that. But I did sand some of it off, and boy, is it beautiful mahogany. So anyway, that's the remainder of our project, and now the customer is coming to pick it up, and boy, is she excited.